For our reflection on the readings intended for today, there is this story about a man who stood before the judgment seat of God, and when the angel of judgment brought out the book of life so that he may be able to give an account of his life before the holy presence of God, the angel concluded that he was not worthy of heaven because there was nothing good in him. But then, when the pronouncement was made, Our Lady intervened and said, I remember that is not accurate, that is not entirely true, because he performed at least one good deed in his whole life, and that is enough to save him. And when they re-examined the book of life, true enough, there was one small detail that the angel of judgment had overlooked. At one point in his life, a beggar came to him, and he gave the beggar a small, half-eaten carrot. And so the angel brought out the carrot from the book of life and said, this is the one that he gave to the beggar. And then God said, hold on to the carrot and you will be worthy of heaven. And so when the man received the carrot, he started flying up to the skies. No? But before he knew it, he did not realize when he was halfway through and was near the pearly gates of heaven, a lot of the other souls began to cling to him, so that they could also rise up and go to heaven. And he started shaking them off from his feet. This is my carrot, this is my carrot. And as he was doing that, he lost grip on the carrot and he fell back to hell. And there he lived happily ever after. The story is that this resonates with the message of the gospel. You know that there are two sets of people that are opposing Jesus in his pre-trial period, before he will soon enter into a more rigorous ordeal, starting with Holy Thursdays, being betrayed by his apostle Judas, and being brought to judgment to be sentenced to death. But this is the pre-trial period just before Holy Week, and the two sets of people who are opposing him are the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Pharisees only live for one purpose. As long as they can fulfill all of God's law according to their understanding, as long as the Roman government will not detract them from doing that, they're happy with just about anything. While on the other hand, the Sadducees were the priestly clan, and their interest was more than just the fulfillment of the laws of God in the Jewish religion. They were also holding some kind of influence over society. Because of being of the priestly class, they collaborated with the Roman officials, and in some ways kind of benefited from the presence of the Roman Empire in Jewish territory. And so they have everything to lose if that was upset. The Pharisees will be offended that if the Romans will forbid them the practice of the religion, they would lose what they hold to be of value. But the Sadducees will lose not only that, but even their sense of power and control. And so they resisted that and began to think of scenarios when Jesus' miracles would continue to draw more people, and this would incite the Romans to destroy the nation of Israel. And when this was written by the gospel writer, who is St. John, that thing that they feared the most had already come to happen, had taken place, because there was some kind of a commotion after Jesus' death, brought about by a different source, and the Romans came and destroyed the land. So that the irony, therefore, is what they feared the most happened to them, because they chose that over Jesus. Meaning, there are certain things that we hold on tenaciously, like holding on to our little carrots of pleasure, even if we know that if we do not let go of that, we will actually let go of life itself. So maybe in these final days of Lent, we examine ourselves. What are the things we are selfishly holding on to, and sometimes for good reason, but not realizing that it opposes the salvation that God has in store for us, to a fuller life, meaning to a holier life, to a more involvement in God's mission, and so on and so forth. So be careful that you are not overly attached to something that might be keeping you away from experiencing God's presence and God's blessing. Amen.